Welcome everybody to the Revive Motor YouTube channel. Today we have a very special guest. We're in our shop. He's going to walk us through some Lock-City drift prep, some safety stuff. He's hopefully going to pick apart the Mustang and tell me exactly what I need to do to get it ready for next year. So with that said, my friend Garrett.
What's up, guys?
How you doing?
Awesome. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. So as I briefly mentioned, thank you for coming down to hang out for a little while.
Yep.
What I wanted to do today was basically have you pick apart, for the most part, the Mustang and tell me what I need to do to prepare for next year. So let's just do that. We'll start from the back and just kind of go from there. What's one of the first things that you look for when somebody rolls into tech?
When they're rolling in, I mean, we're usually starting at the front of the car.
Okay.
They're rolling in facing us, and we'll ask them to shut the car off and pop the hood.
Let's do that then. Let's do it the way you're used to.
All right, we'll start
I know
up front.
I'm changing it up a little bit on you, but we'll do that.
So we'll have you pull up. We'll say, turn the car off and pop the hood for us.
Okay.
And we're going to run through the full inspection. The main reason why we ask people to turn the car off is we want to make sure that car can restart.
Okay.
Because we've had plenty of cars come in where they just die in the line and they get pushed out. And if you can't start your car, you got a bad alternator, a bad battery, and you stall on the track, then we're towing you off.
Right.
So number one, we need to test that the car starts on its own.
Yeah.
So turning it off right away, obviously we're going to have our hands in the engine bay looking around at all your stuff, so we want to make sure, no moving parts and all that. So we'll pop the hood and we'll go for the underhood inspection. Mainly what we're looking for, where's this one hiding?
Should just be a little, hold on, I think I got
This
you.
side.
Where am I at? There we go.
Teamwork. All right.
And we got the old school.
Prop rod.
Yeah.
No, we like these because nobody ever has them.
Huh.
And that's enough of a problem right there. So under the hood, what we're looking for mostly, we go right for the battery, step one, because we got to have batteries that are tied down and they have to have a metal bracket. That there's a host of problems if you don't have that happen, and a lot of it's battery contact with body components.
Yep.
We've had a battery end up somewhere else in the engine bay where it shouldn't. We've had, cars ground out and shut off, fry electrical. So having the battery properly mounted is really important.
Yep.
Doesn't need to be any special kind of battery. Stock mount is totally okay.
Oh,
But
okay.
if it's not a metal bracket mount of
Yep.
some sort, that's a problem.
So that would be a problem
Yeah.
because it's just a strap. It looks like a canvas strap.
Yeah, so it looks like somebody put a hole in a piece of canvas. Now, I don't know what these come with from the factory. A lot of factory cars just have a little bit of a clamp on the bottom of the battery, like that hooks down on it.
Right.
So I wouldn't say, necessarily that the strap is doing any work here, because it looks like it is clamped on the bottom. It has like a plastic wedge. So I wouldn't be worried about this strap because it's not actually holding the battery.
Okay.
It seems like a secondary thought. I don't know if someone blew a hole in it or that's the way they come, but these have a plastic bracket on the bottom, and if it was good enough for Ford, that's good enough for us.
Okay.
What we run into a lot of times is people will have relocated their battery somewhere else, and that's usually where they're more sketchy.
Yep.
They'll put them on, whether it's one of those plastic marine boxes that you get at, an auto parts store or West Marine or something.
Yep.
Or another plastic bottom one, but it's got to be metal because, that brakes goes flying across your trunk or wherever you put your battery, not good.
Yep.
So we'll usually kind of grab your cables and everything, give it a wiggle. Sometimes there's leftover stereo components and sketchy wiring.
There certainly is in this particular model.
Depending on where you're from, you might have more stereo than somewhere else. So, with this, it seems like everything's tight. It's stock connections, not really going anywhere. A car like this is much easier to check over because, while it's probably been through a few owners, it's still the stock drivetrain.
Yep.
Nobody has really dove into it mechanically yet.
Is it just easily identify, things kind of stick out like a sore thumb, if you will, if something's wrong?
If something's wrong, it would stick out like a sore thumb. Otherwise, it's that stock appearance.
Yep.
Everything's equally dusty and untouched. We get a lot of BMWs through, and it's kind of the same thing. You open the hood, you're like, Well, BMW did that. And
Yeah.
you basically close the hood. But this makes it nice and easy because someone has not fiddled with this car a lot.
Right, right.
So we look around. On a modified car, one of the most important things we're looking at is the fuel system. So you want to make sure that all of the fueling is routed properly, and by properly I mean you don't have a fuel line against a header or something stupid like that. Proper clamps and fittings. Worm gear clamps on fuel system stuff is a big no because they dig into the rubber and will actually cause like a spray leak, which instant fire. And people have had that happen before. Thankfully, not at Thompson, but at some other venues we've seen it happen. But if you're going to do anything with your fuel system, you should spend your money on your fuel system. Make sure that you've got good AN fittings, good hoses if you're changing any of that, and make sure you're using the proper clamps. This is all stock as far as the fueling goes with the fuel rail and everything, so this is very easy. I can see that nobody's been messing with it. Nothing really to worry about as far as that goes.
Yep.
But when we get all these engine swap cars in and everything, we're literally checking the type of clamp that you have to make sure it's a smooth clamp and that the rubber hose you're using is rated as fuel injection hose.
It is one of those things that could be overlooked, and not necessarily on purpose, but like, oh yeah, I got this, it's all set. It's one little thing that very easily could, not make sense to somebody.
Yeah, and a lot of people, to be honest, haven't seen that there are hose clamps specifically for fuel lines, and it's the difference of them being completely smooth the whole way around, as opposed to a worm gear clamp like this with the voids in it.
Right.
Just as an example, it's not on the fuel system, but these style of clamp dig into the rubber.
Yeah.
And like even if you run your finger over this, you can feel the rubber sticking up in it.
Yeah.
So that really will eat away at a fuel system from vibration.
I was going to say, especially in a car that's, motorsport based and going to be abused differently than the general on-road stuff.
Clutch kicks are very damaging to all sorts of stuff, so that constant driveline shock can shake a ton of stuff loose.
Yeah.
When you get into suspension and all that too, that's kind of the next thing that we end up looking at.
Yep.
But we'll do some more basic stuff here. It looks like this only we've got an intake here, which is great. But it's not interfering with anything. So we look around and make sure that there's no wiring that is in the way of the accessory belts. A lot of times people doing aftermarket fans and stuff like that will have wires just laying all over the place.
Yep.
And we ask that the wires are like neat and tidy and away from moving and hot components.
Because essentially, you're looking for stuff to not cause a problem. It just anything that's a risk, essentially.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid things that are safety risks and also things that make our life difficult when we have to pull you off track because your car's disabled.
Yeah.
So line and wire routing is one of the biggest things on the modified cars.
Yeah.
You'll see people with maybe a coolant line that's coming off and it's literally resting like a half inch above the belt.
Yeah.
Or like it's touching a pulley. I've seen that. It's like you're going to wear through this and be spraying coolant everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to get towed off or you're going to make a mess on the track, which takes seat time away from everyone else. So under the hood, that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. Again, with this nice, pretty stock car.
Yep.
Real easy. So we can move on to some of the interior stuff if you want.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do that.
So whether or not we're at the front of the tech line or there's someone at the entrance, they're always going to be checking your helmet. We run our helmet requirements pretty much based off of SCCA. Mm-hmm. So if you look up rules for most tracks, they'll be requiring an SA 2015 or 2020 helmet, and that's what we require. The difference between this and a motorcycle helmet is the burn rating. Motorcycle helmets, while they are very safe for impact, they're not made of the same materials for fire problems.
Yeah.
So that's where the Snell, the SA standard, comes into play. So we'll open up your helmet and look, and we're looking for, I don't know if you can see it, but that kind of orangish sticker in there.
I'll get some B-roll of that.
Yep. SA 2020. So these are good for 10 years. So if you've got a 2015, you've got till 2025 technically 2026 season is when it's expired.
Yep.
So we just phased out SA 2010. We're into 2015 and 2020 now. So,
do you guys? I can't remember, but do you guys put up like a like, hey, just going into the season? By the way, these are no longer valid.
We did do that when 2010 was phased out.
Yeah.
Because it did become an instant issue. People weren't aware of it, but we try to post it in the Lock City community forum. We do have it written into the rules, which are pretty much the same now for like 3 years. We haven't really changed much. All of our rules are either based loosely around SCCA stuff or common safety and breakdown problems that we see at the track, specific to drifting.
Yeah.
So the other thing we'll look for in the car, it sounds stupid, but you can't have a driver's floor mat in unless it's pinned.
Yeah.
So, factory BMW has the little pins that you twist to hold your floor mat in place. Some cars will have like a single pin that sticks up through the floor mat to hold it. But the idea is that you don't want that getting bunched up under your pedals and either sticking the throttle or preventing you from braking when you need to stop. So we'll very often ask people, they'll have like the cool like checkerboard floor mats and whatever, Japanese stuff. Just throw them in the trunk while you're driving. Because if it's not the OEM style, it is liable to move when you're moving your feet around because you're dancing on the pedals.
Right. So
we'll look at that real quick. Of course, big safety item, we're always looking at seatbelts and harnesses. Stock seatbelt is always going to be fine. You're never going to have a problem with a stock seatbelt, although it's not recommended to run a stock seatbelt with a fixed back bucket.
Mm-hmm.
Reason being is the lap belt can't get across your lap because it doesn't go through the seat. So it kind of hovers up above, your torso, like your legs area. So, with a fixed back, you want harnesses. And harness routing is something we've been paying attention to and trying to give people suggestions on. That's something that you can very easily look up.
Yep.
The proper, wrap technique for the harnesses, because I literally had someone come through, I'm not kidding, last event, that had the harnesses wrapped around the bar and just tied in a knot. And I'm like, I can't let you drive like this. So I, took him aside, and he knew better too, but he was in a rush.
Yeah.
So I took him aside. I said, here's what you want to look up. The brand that has the whole tutorial on it escapes me at the moment, but there's a double wrap that it does where it comes back through and over the buckle, and that's what really locks it into place. We look to make sure that if you are running harnesses, that they're attached in proper spots, whether it's to the seat bracket, if there's provisions for that, there'll be like an eyelet hole, or the factory location where the belt would have been, because that's a reinforced part of the chassis.
Mm-hmm.
So harnesses are important if you're changing the seats out. If you are coming to drive in a stock seat and a stock seat belt, you won't have any issue with that. All right, hopping around to the other side of the car. There's no seat here right now, so obviously you're not giving any ride-alongs.
Right.
But we are asking that passengers also run the same type of helmet, SA 2015 or 2020. There's a lot of people that show up with like dirt bike helmets and stuff, and really you should be held to the same standard as a passenger as a driver is. So that's what we're asking. If you're going and you want to do some ride-alongs, borrow a helmet from someone else who is either not driving because their group is running, or just get one, race equipped like this, like $200. You can keep it for 10 years, so can't really go wrong with that. The next thing we look for is fire extinguishers. This is like the biggest point of contention that we deal with in the tech line. So, Josh, you don't have one at all right now, but
nope.
We'll get there. So I brought like an example of what we're looking for as far as a bracket would go, because we have a rule in place where you can't use a plastic bracketed fire extinguisher. And this came to be because we had someone who was running out on the skid pad, and they had their fire extinguisher on a plastic bracket. It actually broke and went off in the car and filled the car up with, the extinguisher material.
Oh, Jesus. That's a bad day.
That could be, a trip to the hospital if you get that stuff in your lungs. So we're pretty serious about having a metal bracket. This bracket in particular is, I borrowed it from 36 Matvia. This was from his E36, but metal bracket, they bolt pretty much right to where the seat bolts would go, and it places the extinguisher forward in an accessible area that the driver could reach if they needed to, or the passenger, right by the passenger's feet. But it's a bolted metal bracket. I don't have the extinguisher on it, but this is what we're looking for, something like this.
Yeah.
So if they're attached to the harnesses or the harness bar or the cage or something, that's fine too. It's just got to be accessible in that it comes off. It can't have hose clamps around it. It can't have a ratchet strap around it, bungee cords. It's got to be, something quick release like this where you can peel it out.
Yeah.
I've seen Velcro. I've seen zip ties. Like, none of that flies.
Yeah, because that's the thing. You don't want to be fighting with an extinguisher when your car's on fire, when you're going out to save somebody, to help somebody else, or whatever it might be.
So you are the first responder when it comes to a fire.
Yep.
You're going to know that your car is on fire quicker than anyone else will notice because tire smoke hides a lot of things, and you'll smell it. I've personally put out probably 3 or 4 cars on fire over the years, mostly not at Thompson, thankfully, but we had a lot of people boiling and overheating brakes when we used to run in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
You don't have very much time to make do with your small extinguisher. So you want to make sure you can get it and get out and make the most impact as quick as possible. So we ask that people also carry a charged extinguisher, a canister. The fire sticks are not going to cut it somewhere like Thompson where it's super windy. That was another kind of like big discussion this season because we hadn't really seen them around very much. But there's a company called Element that makes a stick fire extinguisher, and it just kind of sits. And we're allowing those as like a supplemental, but you still have to have a standard charged fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
Because they work like a road flare. You strike them off, and it's like a chemical reaction, but it's not under pressure. It's not charged, so you can't shoot it under the car. You just kind of have to wave it around like you're Harry Potter. So,
and theoretically, with wind or anything like that, you could blow it right off what you're aiming towards.
So how Gru and I made the call on whether or not we can use those is we actually dove into kind of off-roading Baja stuff a little bit, and we found a couple inspectors who were posed the same question, like, does this count as a fire suppression system or an extinguisher? And he's like, I have to say no, because he's like, I went out in the desert, there's some wind present, it wasn't crazy. He's like, but I lit it off and it's just trailing that way, and I couldn't aim it at what I had on fire.
Yeah.
So as a supplemental, they're great. You can keep one, throw one in every car. But on the track, we want you to have a charged extinguisher. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be, 3 pound or 5 pound, or, if you want a big one, go get a real fire suppression system with all the lines and everything too. But, it's really to protect your investment and yourself and your passenger. So one of the things we tried out at the end of the season was this little report card, and this isn't like anything official yet, but this is literally the same rules we have in a full checklist format to help when we have multiple lanes going, because we can't, the officials can't be everywhere all at the same time. So we like to give everyone the same standard, and all this is condensing of the rules so that you could have a checklist.
Yeah.
So I am going to put something together like this that people can download and print out for themselves as a pre-check.
Yeah.
Kind of all the stuff we're going through, just so you can have it handy. And that would be really helpful for people to do this because we want to make the line move faster.
And you currently have not that exact sheet, but you have the rules posted up on the website and stuff. As a matter of fact, way over there, we have them on our door, and we'll kind of go over some of those to close out the video.
Yep. We formatted them. That's a little wordier version, but it's very specific.
Yep.
There's reasons why for every single point of it, but this is the condensed checklist of that. So what we did at the last event was tried this out, and we're like, we'll give everyone a report card, go through them all, and see how everyone did. I wanted to kind of get an idea of like percentage-wise of how many people were having a problem.
Yep.
And it was actually pretty good. We had 4 or 5 people that had to come back to repair things, and we knew if it was for today, if it was for next season, We knew who had to come back, what car they're driving.
Yeah.
So otherwise, they'll be waiting in there all morning till sometimes noon.
Right.
For people to fix stuff and come back around, and not knowing who did and didn't get through.
Yeah.
People will go out and drive and ignore it.
Yeah.
And we want to keep that from happening because we want everyone to, be safe and get all the seat time. So, I think we left off with like kind of the visual inspection we were going to look at.
Yeah. We were going to do kind of an exterior inspection.
Yep. So, one of the things we inspect, believe it or not, if you want to flip the camera on yourself, is the driver.
Whoa.
This guy.
Okay, I'm being inspected visually.
Yep. So we look to make sure that people are wearing closed-toed shoes and long pants. It's a track requirement. Do Crocs count as closed-toed shoes? I guess.
right.
I don't know. They're Swiss cheese shoes.
Yeah.
So, people can't show up in flip-flops and stuff like that, and you're not supposed to drive in shorts.
Yeah.
A lot of cars don't have carpet. You get burnt and stuff, from the heat of the exhaust. So pants are a must. So there is a little bit of driver inspection. And then we start looking at the car. And the first visual thing is, does the car have all of its lug nuts? Because we've had people show up with like 2 or 3 lug nuts on and they expect to go out on the track, and that's not happening. Or broken studs, So we're looking right here. We're not going to torque on them for you. We're hoping you're using a torque wrench, not just Ugga-Duggas on max.
Yeah.
Because that's what snaps studs.
Yeah.
Is people using guns all the time. So, looking up here, we're seeing we got one missing.
Uh-oh.
So that would be a no-no. We'd ask you to go get a lug nut and install that and come back and see us. Looking around this side, I saw there was one missing on the other side too.
Oh boy, I'm down 2.
Down 2, so 2 strikes. Josh and I were having a talk earlier that it's a good idea to do studs and lug nuts on any car you intend on drifting. You're taking the wheels on and off a lot, and it's a lot of stress on those threads. And what you're putting the car through is a lot of stress on those threads too. So if you're in there, change them out and start fresh. It can't hurt. You might as well do extended ones anyways in case you need some wheel spacers for the wheels, I guess you guys haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Probably for this thing. So, if you need to spacer it up, you're going to have an extended one. We're just checking to make sure that they're all there, really.
What is your general opinion on spacers in, track use?
I think if you're going to use spacers, they should be hub-centric. Personally, I don't really care for adapter-type spacers, but if you Loctite that first one, it should be fine.
Yep.
We have people use them all the time. Our buddy Mike, Petey Pobbs, Shook Nose as well, longtime friend from the Shoreline. He had a set of TEs on his old 350Z. He had a Nismo edition. He had like a 50 mil spacer on the back like this. And he beat the living hell out of that car for like years.
Yeah.
Never had a problem. So I'm a firm believer that if they're installed correctly by the right person, they can be fine. With the big billet ones, they're quality made. You're okay. But, there's no ruling on whether or not spacers are allowed or not allowed. Everyone's going to run some kind of spacer to make your wheels fit right. So
yeah.
Just do it safely and don't do the AutoZone ones. You've all seen them, the universal ones that you can take and just like around the rosie.
Shimmy around. Yeah.
Don't use those ever.
Yeah.
Because you're going to lose a wheel.
Spend the extra few bucks, make it safer.
Yep. As far as like continuing visual inspection, we do kind of get down under the car and try to see if it's leaking at all. It's really hard to catch leaks at the track, but that is one of the biggest things that the track wants to keep from happening. So, we're looking at that under the hood, and we're also trying to see if the car is actively dripping something.
Yeah.
When we'll have you jack it up and we'll do a wiggle test on it. We have everyone jack up their own car because we don't want to jack it up in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And you should know your own
especially
spot.
with a bunch of kits and whatnot.
Body kits, most cars that are coming in are pretty low and we're putting them on ramps first.
Yeah.
And we've had people come in and not know how to jack their own car up. And that's honestly a little concerning. I appreciate people want to get into the sport without knowing that much, but you should at least know that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we will take the time to help people if they don't know where it's okay to jack the car up. Teach them a little bit in the process.
Yeah.
But we expect that when you come through, we're going to do a wiggle test on the whole front end, make sure nothing's falling apart, and that you'll be safe to go out on track because your suspension is not actively coming apart.
Right, right.
So that's probably what we'll do next here. I'll get Josh to man the jack, and we'll look at the front end.
All right, so we get the car jacked up. I'm going to go on to the other side, and we're going to get underneath it. Excuse me. We're going to get underneath it so Garrett can take a look and see what we can find.
So once we have everyone jack it up on their own, we like to get people doing that, like I said before, so they're comfortable with it. You're going to have to do it every day.
Yep.
Every time you come to the track, at least. We'll swing around and look. We usually try to get the whole front end up in the air. In this case, we don't necessarily trust the front spots to bring up this heavy car. So we got one side. We grab it and do a wiggle test, and we'll usually just spin it to make sure the brakes aren't dragging. We'll do up and down. That will show us if your wheel bearing's smoked, or in the case of like S chassis like to really loosen up the coilovers on the front, the locking collars for your ride height adjustment. Mm-hmm. They constantly will spin themselves loose. So you'll sometimes take a wheel and move it all over the place, just up and down motion like that. And then we'll do side to side to check your steering play. And we can see that Josh has got a little bit of play going on here, getting the side to side wiggle. So you can usually assume it's one of a few things. In drifting, inner and outer tie rods are constantly the thing that get abused and eaten the most. A lot of times inners. Certain cars, people, when they run rack spacers, if they don't Loctite them, the inner will back itself out of the rack, and you'll actually just have all that play right at the inner where it threads into the rack. Some cars are, multi-link cars specifically, they tend to eat ball joints. So if you've got a car with double wishbone in the front, like an IS 300 or something, a lot of times that upper ball joint is just gone. Mm-hmm. And we come across that. I think Picouts stopped by with his G. He actually had a wiped out upper ball joint. He went and changed it and then came back over, and he was back on the track within an hour.
Yep.
So we'll get under the front and look and see where we're getting this from. All right, we're back on the ground, and we're obviously not under the car because there's no jack stand present. So we're just kind of looking, trying to see what kind of play he's got going on. And if I grab the wheel and you guys look kind of right over there, you can see we've got some movement in the steering components. So it's probably, on this, it's probably the inner wallowed out in here. So that would be something, at this amount of play, we would say, keep an eye on it if you're on the skid pad, but that would be an obvious no on the road course because you're supposed to have zero play for getting out on the track and doing, fast driving.
Yeah.
You obviously want to make sure all your stuff is new when you're trying to go track your car. But that's, a good case in point of just an inner being bad. Even you can put your hand, feel a little bit of outer too. So, on your replacement list.
Yep. We'll have to get those.
Yep. And then we would repeat with the other side to make sure that the other side is all within spec and tight. I mean, I've even seen some stuff that is finger tight. Someone just changed new coilovers or changed something and they're in a rush the night before and they forget to tighten something up.
Yep.
And sometimes you'll wiggle it around and it's like, dude, that bolt is loose. Please tighten it and come back. Weissfab tends to tear itself to pieces. Eats tie rods, all the sphericals, the Heims, they get wallowed out. And, there are consumable parts on these angle kits because they go through such a beating that you have to keep on top of it. So good rule of thumb, anyone that's drifting, carry at least one inner and outer tie rod, as spares. Because even if you go off, you bump a curb real bad or something, you can bend it pretty easy.
Yeah.
Much easier on something like an S chassis where it's like a tiny little threaded rod. These are a little bit beefier because it's a bigger car. But those are always something you want to keep an eye on.
So we were just quickly talking off camera, but we wanted to include, so we didn't forget, tow hooks and things like that.
So we talked about it, and people hem and haw over the tow hook thing, but The point is that if your car is broken on the track, we have to get you off the track quickly. So we will hook it to whatever we can find. Most cars have a factory towing spot in the front, whether it's for the tow truck, the little oblong, like oval hole where you can get a hook in.
Yep.
Or, sometimes on the frame rail somewhere there's one of those hanging down. Or you'll have a knockout in the bumper with a threaded in one. We do have a rule saying that you have to have tow hooks available. It's not like we're requiring you to have like the sticker with the big funky tow hook hanging out that says tow.
Or the big heart.
Or the heart or a strap hanging out or something like, no Surikawa subway handle. We're not towing off of that. But, we'll hook to the first thing we can find. In some cases, a car is a tube front.
They don't have a like somebody with a bash bar, fine, right?
Bash bar, we'll hook it on the bash bar.
Yeah.
It's usually plainly visible. And it's not until cars start coming through and they're super cut up and have like tube front ends where you start losing those factory mounts. So most of the time that's fine. But we do encourage, if you've got a threaded one, make sure it's somewhere with you in the car in case you need it. You can knock your bumper out and thread that in to get towed off.
All right, so we got the car back on the ground, and we can continue the exterior inspection and then check anything in the trunk, rear end, things of that nature.
So we don't actually jack up the rear of the car. You should be checking that on your own is what our assumption is. The only thing we really do look for is to make sure that you have mufflers.
Yep.
Because as much as we all love a big, loud, angry, bald eagle V8, the neighbors at the track probably don't love it.
Yep.
And they do have a decibel limit. I have seen the track manager out there with a gun checking on some stuff here and there.
Yep.
We usually don't get yelled at too much, but we have a rule in there that states you have to have a muffler present. It can be a small muffler, I don't care, as long as there's a muffler. And it's got to exit behind the rear wheels.
Yeah.
So we don't want your exhaust dumping out under the car where it's going to fill the cabin with exhaust. We want to see that it comes out the back of the car, whether that's a little turned down behind the rear wheels or all the way out, stock location.
Yeah.
You've got to have something in place for exhaust. Plenty of cars come through, oh, I just ripped it off on the trailer. Well, fix it.
Yeah.
It is in the rules, so we've had to be a little bit harsher about the exhaust stuff lately. Even some of these turbo cars would come through and they'd be like, I love the way it sounds straight piped. It's not too loud, is it? And they take off and it's like ear blistering loud.
Absurd.
And we all think of the 350Z, trumpet.
Yeah.
We're going deaf on the line as we're sending cars, so please have a muffler.
VQ Nation.
Yeah. So we look under the back and just kind of check that there's mufflers present. There are. That's good. And then the one thing that Lynch is a big stickler about is you want to make sure that the car comes through completely empty. And I see...
Oh, wow, would you look at that?
There's a couple of items in here.
Get your freshly ready coffee at revivalmotoring.com. We'll have to move that, I guess.
While that's not allowed in the tech line, we like to see everything out of the vehicle. You should take your spare out if you haven't. That's extra weight you don't need back there. A lot of stock spares are not secured, so take it out.
My little drip pan.
And then this is good. It's nice and empty. No battery back here to worry about. But that pretty much, that would be one of the first things we'd be checking is we get in the trunk and we check the inside of the car. It's all got to be empty.
Yep. We did want to talk about one other thing, fueling related.
The kind of the last thing we were thinking about is that we do see a lot of cars come through, and when they have an engine swap done, the person's first instinct would be, I should put a fuel cell in the car because it's cool race car, right? Cut the floor out, do something in the trunk with that. But a lot of times your safest fueling is going to be a factory location tank. So use what you have. If you can put a drop-in pump, that's way better. If you want to come through with a fuel cell, that's fine. We have a mock fuel cell in here. We can see the Revival Motoring Apple box.
It's our mock box.
Mock box. But we've had them come in where people have them just sitting like this and they're bolted to the floor, no rubber isolators, no nothing.
Jesus.
Yeah, we've seen a bunch of different stuff, but typically what people do is they'll build it elevated if they're fabricating something, and they'll put it on rubber isolators so you don't break the fuel cell.
Yeah.
Like we talked about before, all the proper AN fittings and routing. You want to grommet any hole in the floor that the fueling is going through.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing actually is that you need a firewall of some sort. So if we look in this car, you know, with the rear seats removed, you can see clear through to the passenger compartment.
Right.
There would have to be a sealed off metal firewall in place if you wanted to have a fuel cell in the trunk of this.
Okay.
Because you obviously don't want, if there was a spill or a problem, you don't want that fire being able to enter the cabin.
I was going to say, I have to assume worst case scenario, an explosion.
Explosion. You know, even as far as rear mounted radiators, when you get the cars that are super comp level and all cut up,
Yep.
there still should be something blocking you. Because I don't know if anyone else saw, but there was a kid in a little go-kart who got like kind of showered in coolant at a very popular track down south.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, crazy burn unit stuff.
Yeah, just not
like
good.
Anything that's like hot fluids, you know, of course fire.
Yeah.
You want to be separated from the passenger compartment.
Yeah, that's a very good. I honestly didn't know that. Not that this car's going to have a fuel cell by any means, but I didn't know that's something, you know.
We did write a provision in about fuel cells for that reason, because we had a couple cars come through, whether the tank was ratchet strapped in there or
Yeah.
whether it was, you know, just bolted onto a piece of wood on the floor. Spend your money on fueling. If
Yeah.
you're changing anything about the fuel system, that's not where you cut costs.
Yeah.
So that's wrapping it up on the fuel system.
Do you want to just go over the big list that we have on the board real quick? And I
Sure.
think that kind of...
Yeah, so we'll take our checklist over. So like I said before, the report card that we came up with, we're going to have in some sort of checklist form. I don't know if we'll be using it necessarily in the tech line, but we did test it out and we really liked the results. But it's a condensed version of this. And this has all the same stuff just spelled out. It's even in the same order. But this really makes sure that everyone knows up front, you know, what you need to do. And most of it's common sense safety stuff.
Yeah.
There's a few of those small nitpick items, you know, related to heat shields with turbos and stuff like that with a lot of the modified cars that we do see. So the biggest thing at the bottom is that Lock City Drift officials reserve the right to stop a car from driving at any time during an event, including but not limited to tech violations, to re-inspect. So when a couple cars crash and, you know, there's something visibly wrong with a car, we may say, hey, we want to get you back through the line.
Yeah.
Come check it out, make sure it's still good and safe before you go back out.
I think that's doing exactly what you need to do. I can get people being upset or like, oh, I'm losing out on track time or something. It was just a little banger or whatever. But again, err on the side of caution always.
Yeah, and we're obviously not looking to take seat time away from anyone. The biggest thing is we just want to make sure that the car is safe. You know, we've had people go out before and like take a muffler off their car after they came through tech with a muffler on.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, sorry, buddy, like,
yeah,
you've got to put that back on. Like,
yeah,
you know, you can't really pull a fast one like that. So
yeah.
We have, in some cases, pulled a car off because we've seen, hey, this guy's going around the skid pad and he just filled his car up with gas and now gas is pouring out of the gas door of the car. So you got to go take care of that, and then you got to come show us that you took care of it.
Yeah.
And this happens throughout the day. Not very often. We're not trying to police everything, but you know,
again,
we do see instances.
A noticeable, yeah.
Yep. Safety first, I guess. You know.
Well, I think that kind of covers, you know, everything I need to do for my car in preparation for. I don't want this thing to fall. In preparation for the springtime. Garrett, seriously, man, thank you very much for coming to hang out.
Thanks for having me.
Walking us through all of that. Hopefully, whoever watches this takes something away from it, and you know, it can help better prepare you for next season. Maybe learn some things. It's all pretty logical and common sense stuff that's put in place to keep everybody safe and keep everybody on the track, you know, more so you can get out there and have a good time. So again, I appreciate Garrett. Love Lock City, guys. Love Lock City in general. I'm very excited to be there next year. So yeah, we'll go from there. We'll start building this thing and getting it ready. Thanks.